Hey guys, tonight we're heading way back in time, before Cleopatra, before pharaohs got buried with golden sunglasses, even before cats figured out they were gods. Imagine a world of sand-whipped cities, sun-scorched fields, and narrow alleys echoing with the slap of bare feet on limestone. You're not royalty, you're not a priestess, you're just you. A girl, born in ancient Egypt. And honestly, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink into life under the harsh Egyptian sun, a squirming newborn in a world that's already decided most of what your life will be. Your family is thrilled, unless they were hoping for a boy. Which, let's be honest, they probably were. Boys carry the name, work the fields, become scribes or soldiers. You're someone's future wife. Possibly already promised before your first tooth comes in. Your mother swaddles you in linen, speaks softly to the midwife, and looks relieved you didn't die during childbirth. Infant mortality is high. Like, roll the dice high. And if you survive infancy? Welcome to a survival game where your gender is your first handicap. From the moment you learn to walk, your tasks start piling up. You learn how to carry water jugs, grind grain, avoid snakes, and balance trays on your head like you were born with GPS school? That's for boys with wealthy dads. If you're very, very lucky, a kind brother might show you how to write a few hieroglyphs in the dust. But your main curriculum? Domestic survival. You watch your mother work, kneading dough with sunburned hands, trading gossip in the market, and praying her husband doesn't come home in a bad mood. She teaches you what food not to burn, what herbs help with cramps, and which neighbors to avoid after sundown. It's a crash course in quiet obedience, and you're expected to absorb it like a sponge. Historians still argue whether the average Egyptian woman had more freedom compared to her peers in Greece or Rome. Sure, you can own property. In theory. Sure, you can inherit. But will you actually use those rights without social backlash? Probably not. Legal rights and practical freedom aren't exactly drinking from the same Nile. And the Nile is central to everything. It feeds your family, determines the planting season, and sometimes floods your whole neighborhood. You learn to love it and fear it. Your little feet dance around the shore, chasing frogs and waving reeds, while your mother yells at you to stay back. Crocodiles like snacks that wiggle. You're 5 when you first see a childbirth. You hear the screams, the prayers, the absolute chaos. It's your aunt, and the baby comes out blue. She doesn't make it. You're not told much, but the image never leaves you. Later, when you ask your mother why people didn't help more, she shrugs. The gods take who they want. That's the go-to explanation for everything. Sickness, stillbirth, even that time a neighbor dropped dead after stepping on a sacred ibis. As you grow, you start to notice how boys are allowed to roam farther, speak louder, joke dirtier. You keep your voice soft, your eyes low, and your dress clean. You're trained to be small, physically, emotionally, conversationally. Not because anyone says it outright, but because you've seen what happens to girls who aren't. A neighbor's daughter was too wild, and now she's gone. Taken as a servant in a rich house. Or worse. Your body starts to change. There's no birds and bees talk. Just a sharp side eye from your mother when your chest starts growing, and a hand-me-down linen wrap to bind it flat. She says, "It's better this way." You don't ask questions. You already know they won't be answered. Mainstream history likes to paint ancient Egypt as progressive because queens ruled and goddesses were revered. But that doesn't translate to daily life. You're more likely to be compared to a cow, fertile, a cat, quiet, or a goose, easily plucked, than to Isis. Sometimes, at the temple festivals, you catch a glimpse of the priestesses, women in fine linen, adorned with beads and kohl-lined eyes. You think, maybe I could be that. But even that path is limited. You'd have to be born into the right family, say the right prayers, stay pure. And even then, You serve the gods, under the eyes of male priests. You hit age 10. You can already cook, sew, harvest, barter, and keep 3 toddlers alive while your mom runs to the neighbors. Your hands are calloused. Your knees are scratched. You've probably killed more scorpions than you've played games. And you're already being watched. Older women start commenting on your ripening. A family friend brings your mother a small jug of oil and asks about your dowry. You try to keep playing knucklebones with your cousins, but something's shifted. You're being appraised like a fruit in the market. Your father starts locking the door earlier. You're no longer sent out alone. You've become a reputation risk. Your very existence is now a balancing act between being useful and not being ruined. You lie in bed some nights, sweating in the thick air, listening to the muffled sounds of your parents arguing or the street dogs fighting over scraps. You wonder what's ahead. You've seen the young wives, barely older than you, already carrying babies. You've heard the stories of girls taken in their sleep, married off before their voices even dropped. No one asks what you want. That's not part of the script. Your body betrays you one morning. You wake to find blood on the linen mat beneath you. For a heartbeat, you think you're dying. You scramble to hide it, heart racing, but your mother notices before you can even fold the cloth. She doesn't gasp or comfort you. She just nods, presses her lips tight, and says, "Stay inside today." Word travels fast in mud brick homes. Within the hour, 2 neighborhood women appear with herbs and something that smells like sour beer. One hands you a satchel of rags, another lights incense and mutters something about Hather's blessing. You sit in the corner, stunned, the weight of their eyes and their words pressing down harder than the cramps in your belly. Menstruation is not your private affair. It's a public signal, you're fertile. And in this world, that means you're suddenly useful in a new, and frankly terrifying, way. You've become a commodity, whether or not you understand what that means yet. There's no such thing as Midol or heating pads. You chew bitter herbs, wrap warm stones in cloth, and endure. One old woman offers a spell, something about crocodile fat rubbed on your ankles. You don't ask questions. You just nod and thank her, because now you're a walking shrine to modesty and superstition. Historians still argue whether Egyptian women were considered ritually unclean during menstruation. Some say there's no solid evidence of taboo. Others point to practices involving isolation or restriction from certain religious rites. All you know is that this week, you're not allowed near the temple, not allowed to cook for the gods, and definitely not allowed to sit on the family's best mat. The irony? In a culture obsessed with fertility gods and cycles of life, your period, the very signal of those cycles, is treated like something between a divine omen and a contagious curse. People pretend to honor it, but no one really wants to talk about the stains or the smell or the pain. You try to get used to the rhythm. The blood, the cramps, the side glances. You get better at folding rags, sneaking off to rinse them in the Nile when no one's looking, pretending nothing's happening. But every cycle is a reminder, your body's not just yours anymore. It's a tool, a clock ticking toward marriage, pregnancy, and the exhausting loop of ancient womanhood. You overhear your mother whispering with a neighbor, something about getting her settled soon. That's how they talk about marriage. Like putting away fresh bread. Settled. Safe. Off the market. One of your cousins just got married. She's 12. Her husband is 28. You saw her at the market last week, looking exhausted and quiet. She used to climb trees with you. Now she carries a baby and avoids eye contact. You wonder when your turn will come. You try not to think about it. But your body keeps reminding you. Every drop of blood is a countdown. The strange part is how normal this all feels. You see it around you constantly. Girls disappear into marriage like it's a natural season. Spring, flood, harvest, bride. No one asks how you feel about it. No one ever says, maybe not yet. Time is a wheel that doesn't pause for your fear. Your mother gives you a charm to wear, a small figurine of Bess, the protector of women and childbirth. He's stubby, ugly, and oddly comforting. She says he'll keep you safe. You sleep with it clutched in your hand, as if a clay trinket can fight back fate. There's a fringe belief, not widely held but whispered by older women, that a girl's first blood can call on spirits, either blessings or mischief. One woman claims her daughter had dreams of the dead speaking to her during her first cycle. Another says she floated above her own body for 3 days. You don't experience anything quite so dramatic. Just cramps, shame, and a permanent stain on your favorite tunic. Still, part of you wonders, what if something sacred did awaken? What if your body is more than a burden? You try to hold on to that thought. One day, during the blood days, you catch a boy watching you. He's a scribe's apprentice, barely older than you, and he looks away quickly. But your heart jumps. Not because you're in love, please. It's because you know that look means trouble. A girl who's looked at too much becomes a problem. You start taking longer routes, ducking behind carts, pulling your shawl tighter. That evening, your mother hands you a thicker veil. No comment. Just, here. It's happening. You miss the freedom of childhood, running barefoot, yelling through the fields, not caring who saw your knees. Now, you're constantly adjusting, constantly aware. Your posture, your volume, even your laughter. Everything about you must be measured. Some girls rebel. One, named Senti, refused to cover her hair and was sent to live with an aunt in a more conservative village. You haven't heard from her since. People whisper that she was cursed, or worse, touched by Seth. You try not to imagine what that means. You have dreams of swimming in the Nile alone, far from the docks and shouting fishermen. In the dream, your body feels weightless, undefined, free. You wake up smiling, then quickly frown. There's blood between your legs again. You try to hide it, just for a few minutes of pretending. Just for a little longer. You don't get to choose your husband. It's not like some awkward village dance where you make eye contact across a platter of figs and slowly fall in love over shared pomegranate seeds. No, your marriage begins as a conversation between your father and someone else's father, while you carry water in the background, pretending not to listen. You're 13. Your hips have started to curve, your skin has smoothed into that sheen women get in the heat, and your blood has arrived like clockwork every month for a year now. To your family, that means one thing: you're ripe. Not brilliant, not funny, not a future priestess or herbalist, just ripe. You hear your father mention your dowry: 2 goats, a jar of beer, and a small piece of land that floods well in the planting season. You don't even like goats. The groom's name is Hori. He's 25, works with stone, and has thick hands and a quiet voice. You met him once. He complimented your sandals. That's probably the nicest thing he'll ever say to you. Marriage is a transaction. Romantic love isn't part of the deal. Historians still argue whether affection grew in these unions or whether most couples simply tolerated each other. You'd like to believe in affection, but you've seen your uncle yell at your aunt for burning lentils, and he was one of the good ones. Your mother explains what to expect the night before your wedding. Well, she tries. Her words are vague, her tone nervous, and she keeps glancing at the door. It will hurt a little, she mutters. But then it's over. That's all she says. You're scrubbed down by relatives, rubbed in perfumed oils that smell like crushed myrrh and dust, and braided so tightly your scalp stings. An amulet of Hathor is tied to your wrist. You're told it brings fertility and protection, but honestly, it feels more like a receipt. The wedding is loud, drums, clapping, food you don't get to enjoy because everyone's staring at you. You wear linen dyed slightly pink, which is supposed to symbolize joy. Or blood. Or peaches. It's unclear. You walk beside Hori, your new husband, who smiles once and then falls into silence like someone entering a tomb. He seems nervous too. You'd find that comforting if your stomach weren't folding in on itself. That night, you're brought to his family's home. You no longer live with your mother. You no longer sleep on your woven mat in the corner, near the kitchen where you used to listen to the wind whisper through the shutters. You're in a new space, and everyone expects you to act like you belong. When you and Hori are finally alone, the air is thick with expectation and fear. He sits beside you, doesn't speak for a long time, then offers you a date from the small wedding tray. You take it. You chew slowly. It tastes like ash and honey. You lie down when you're told. You brace. And later, you don't cry, because you already did that earlier, by the river, when no one could see. Mainstream accounts of Egyptian marriage ceremonies rarely mention what happens behind closed doors. There's talk of customs, festivals, and fertility charms, but not the sharp shock of first intimacy, not the confusion, not the ache in the morning when you rise and your legs feel like they belong to someone else. Some quirky folk traditions say that placing a frog bone under the bed will ensure a peaceful union. You wish someone had tried that. You're now a wife, which means your day starts earlier and ends later. You prepare food for your husband's family, you grind grain with hands still sore from the wedding, and you try to smile when the neighbors ask if there's any good news yet. They mean a baby. Of course. Because that's the next step. Pregnancy. The fastest way to prove your worth. You pretend your belly is heavier than it is, hoping it means something is growing. You try different positions they say help, lying upside down, eating honey soaked with date seeds, even whispering your wish to a statue of Tauret, the goddess with the face of a hippo and the teeth of someone who means business. But it doesn't happen immediately. And soon the questions start. Are you eating the right things? Are you praying enough? Is something wrong with you? You're barely 14, and you already feel defective. Historians still debate how often ancient Egyptian women faced pressure to produce heirs in non-noble households. But fertility was sacred, and failure to bear children often resulted in social shame, or worse, divorce. Yes, divorce was possible. On papyrus, anyway. But in real life, a husband could simply send you back to your family, and guess what? Your father doesn't want a used daughter back. You overhear a neighbor suggest your husband might take a second wife. You try not to react, but that night, you sob quietly, curled on a straw mat that still doesn't feel like yours. There are stories of women faking pregnancies, stuffing cloth under their gowns, even smuggling herbs to trigger miscarriages if the baby came from another man. Yes, that happened, too. No one talks about it openly. But the midwives know. The old women whisper. You eventually do become pregnant. It happens slowly, like dawn creeping over the desert. One day, you wake up queasy. The next, you cry during a story you've heard a dozen times. Then you feel the unmistakable flutter inside you, like a fish turning in a clay jar. Everyone rejoices. Your husband is kinder. Your mother-in-law smiles. You get more figs at dinner. You are finally becoming valuable, which is a strange way to describe a human being. Pregnancy is supposed to be sacred. That's what they tell you, anyway. A divine calling. A gift from the gods. But as your belly swells and your ankles throb like they're full of wet sand, the sacred part starts to feel suspiciously like suffering in a slightly nicer tunic. The morning sickness is relentless. No one warns you about the smell of fish stew making you gag or how sunlight now feels like an insult. You vomit behind a storage pot, straighten your back, and keep grinding barley like it's just another Tuesday, which, for you, it is. In the house, your value has gone up, sure. But so has the pressure. Every ache is met with, "That's good," means the baby is strong. Every complaint is silenced with tales of women who gave birth in fields, then got right back to threshing wheat. One aunt says she sneezed her youngest into the world and didn't even spill her beer. You're not that lucky. Midwives check on you now and then. They're usually old, smelling of herbs and old sweat, with hands that know more than any physician. They bring strange charms, ivory wands carved with protective figures, crocodile teeth to ward off evil, and once, a dried lizard that you're pretty sure wasn't approved by any temple. Still, you keep it near your bed. Historians still argue whether midwives had formal training or if it was all passed down by word of mouth and superstition. Some believe they were deeply respected healers. Others say they were considered barely above servants. What you know is this: when one of them lays a hand on your stomach and nods, you feel like you can breathe again. But the fear doesn't go away. You hear stories. Women who bled too much. Babies born not breathing. Breech births where the midwife had to reach inside and twist. One neighbor dies in her hut, and the village says it was the will of the gods. You say nothing, but you remember her face and how her husband burned her sleeping mat the next day. A quirky ritual circulates among some older women. They say if you draw a fish on your belly in henna, the baby will swim out faster. You try it. Anything helps when you're living in a time with no painkillers and no clue whether your womb is a miracle or a death sentence. The final weeks are a blur of discomfort and prayers. Your feet barely fit into your sandals. You waddle like a papyrus boat loaded with bricks. You can't sleep. Every time the baby shifts, you think, this is it. But it's not. Not yet. And then one night, as the moon rises fat and orange over the date palms, it begins. At first, it feels like cramps. Manageable. Familiar. You think, maybe it'll be quick. It is not. The pain comes in waves, stronger, closer. You dig your fingers into the floor mat and try not to scream. Women gather around you, your mother-in-law, the midwife, a cousin who's done this 3 times and acts like she's coaching a donkey up a hill. You push. You sweat. You pray. You beg. The walls feel like they're pulsing. The smell of incense is thick and sour. You feel something shift in your bones, a click, a burn, a tearing, and then, silence. A pause so long you think maybe it's over and you've failed. But then, crying. Sharp, loud, beautiful. A sound more powerful than any hymn sung in the temple. It's a girl. They don't cheer. They just nod. A boy would have brought celebration. A girl means they start preparing again. Still, you cry. But this time it's from relief. From the miracle of surviving. Because in ancient Egypt, childbirth is often the closest a woman comes to dying without being buried. And you made it through. Historians note that Egyptian art often idealizes motherhood. Carvings show serene women nursing wide-eyed babies, seated calmly on thrones like tiny goddesses. But what they don't show is the blood, the fear, the afterbirth, the torn flesh, the way your body feels like it's been beaten by the sun and stitched back together by wind. You lie still for days. Your mother-in-law brings soup, the midwife checks your stitches, and your husband nods awkwardly from the doorway. He doesn't come in. That's not his place. You hold your daughter, small and squirming, her head covered in dark fuzz. You name her Merit, beloved. You wonder what kind of world she'll grow into. She latches to your breast quickly. The first feeding is strange, a mix of joy and pain. Your nipples blister. Your back aches from sitting too long. You smell like sour milk and iron. Still, you sing to her softly, an old lullaby your mother used to hum when you were small and safe and didn't know what any of this meant. The others say you'll be expected to try again soon. A woman should bear multiple children, 5, 6, maybe more. Not all will live. You know this. You've seen the tiny graves along the edge of the village, half sunken and covered in palm fronds. But for now, you hold Merit and let your eyes close. And for the first time in weeks, you dream of water, not the Nile, but a deep, silent pool where your body is weightless again, and no one asks you to be anything except still. You'd think surviving childbirth would earn you a nap, or maybe a seat in the shade while someone else hauls water for once. Nope. 2 weeks later, you're balancing a clay jar on your head again, baby tied to your chest in a sling that smells like spit and cumin. The village expects you to bounce back fast. Rest is a luxury reserved for nobility, or death. You're neither. So you tuck your sore body into your old routines like it's a tunic that shrunk in the wash. Everything is harder now. Cooking takes twice as long because Merit cries every time you set her down. Bathing becomes a strategic operation involving someone to distract her while you scrub yourself in under 3 minutes. You've stopped worrying about how you smell. If the gods mind a little sour milk and smoke, they can take it up with Hathor. Domestic life in ancient Egypt is a full-body workout without the cool-down stretch. You're up at sunrise grinding barley, mashing lentils, drying fish, checking the bread oven, patching mats, darning tunics, sweeping out the mudroom, all while keeping Merit from rolling into the fire pit. The house never stops needing something. It's like being trapped inside a hungry stomach. Historians generally agree that women ran the household economy. That sounds empowering until you realize that ran actually means did everything. If you're lucky, your husband carries in a basket of reeds from the field and acts like he invented agriculture. Your role as a wife has a job description longer than a temple hymn. You manage food supplies, cloth production, family health, ancestor offerings, and occasional neighbor drama when someone accuses someone else's goat of theft. And if the granary gets moldy, that's your fault too. You sometimes wish for silence, but not too much silence. Silence might mean Merit isn't breathing. There's a saying passed between mothers, a sleeping baby is a trick of the gods. You never trust it. When Merit finally dozes, you tiptoe like a tomb thief and still manage to step on the one squeaky reed on the floor. The older women tell you your body will bounce back. You're waiting. So far, it's bounced back into stretch marks, hair loss, and the suspicious return of your monthly blood. Every time it arrives, you remember that it means you can get pregnant again. The thought makes you both proud and nauseous. Let's talk about sex again, shall we? It's back on the menu, whether you're ready or not. No one asks how you feel about it. You're married, and your husband has needs. You try not to flinch when he touches you. He's not cruel, just clueless. Gentle, sometimes. Other times, rushed, like he's racing the sunset. You don't fake pleasure, you fake indifference. It's easier. A quirky old tip floats your way from the neighbor with 4 sons and no filter. Rub lettuce juice on your thighs to increase desire. You try it. You just end up smelling like soup. Historians still argue whether Egyptian marriages had emotional intimacy or were strictly practical. Love poems have been found, verses about yearning and moonlit embraces, but those usually came from scribes and nobles. You doubt the women in your neighborhood were scribbling odes between diaper changes. Sometimes you envy the priestesses. They live in temple compounds, sworn to chastity, their days filled with incense and chant, not diaper rash and dinner prep. Then again, their hair is always shaved, and they have to deal with sacred cats peeing on everything. Your only escape from routine is walking to the market. You sling Merit on your back, adjust your headscarf, and make the trek across dust-choked lanes lined with the usual noise. Kids chasing chickens, a potter yelling about cracked wares, someone hawking lotus perfume like it's the cure for heartbreak. At the market, you barter for lentils, try not to get scammed on garlic, and sneak a small honey cake for yourself. A forbidden luxury. You eat it in secret behind a cart, and for 3 minutes, you feel like a goddess. But even here, you're not truly free. If you speak too boldly, some man might mutter about women forgetting their place. If your tunic slips and shows too much shoulder, you risk the judgmental side eye of every matron within 30 cubits. You smile, keep your head down, and leave before the baker's apprentice starts flirting again. Still, there's a strange beauty to it all. The rhythm of daily life, the sweep of the broom, the heat of the hearth, the scratch of papyrus as you tally lentils. It becomes a kind of meditation. A soft, constant hum that lulls your mind while your hands work. You think about your mother, and her mother before her, all the way back to some distant ancestress grinding wheat by a riverbank before pyramids were even a dream. You belong to that lineage. Not the glamorous part of history. The invisible spine that held everything up. One evening, your husband brings home a carving. It's small, made of faience, shaped like a goddess cradling a child. He says it reminded him of you. You don't know what to say, so you nod. You place it on the shelf by the cooking pots. And the next morning, when the fire won't light and the baby's teething and your back feels like it's been personally cursed by Seth, you glance at that little statue. And for just a moment, you feel seen. Time marches forward, and with it, your child. Merit no longer clings to your chest like a newborn. Now she toddles barefoot around the courtyard, sticky with date syrup and questions. She points at everything, dogs, birds, dung beetles, and names them in her toddler voice, halfway between a blessing and a spell. You should feel proud. She's healthy. She's curious. She only fell into the fish pond once. But you also feel something else, something clawing at the back of your throat that you don't say out loud. Dread. Because now, raising her is your full-time responsibility. Not just feeding her, but shaping her. Teaching her how to survive in a world that's already stacked the deck against her. And it starts earlier than anyone wants to admit. You have to teach her how to be a girl. In ancient Egypt, childhood isn't some golden age of innocence. It's a waiting room for adulthood, and the line moves fast, especially if you're a girl. By age 5 or 6, Merit is expected to help out. Carry firewood. Fetch water. Watch her baby cousins so their mothers can work. You tell her to be quiet when men are speaking. To smile, but not too wide. To keep her knees together when she sits. And when she asks why, you don't have a good answer. Just, because that's how it is. Historians still argue whether girls had formal education. Some records show daughters of scribes learning to write, even composing poems. Others suggest that unless you were born into wealth, school wasn't for you. For Merit, her lessons are practical. How to knead dough, how to fold linen, how to avoid trouble. That last one is the hardest. There's a quirky belief whispered among women in your neighborhood. If a girl walks under a full moon while chewing lotus petals, she'll grow up graceful and obedient. You try it with Merit once, just for fun. She eats the petals, spits them out, and climbs a tree. So, not exactly obedient. You want her to be strong, but strength comes at a cost. The stronger a girl is, the more the world pushes back. When Merit turns 7, she starts to notice things. She sees how her brother gets praised for climbing the wall, while she gets scolded for dirty feet. She watches how women defer to men, even when they're wrong. She asks why she can't be a scribe. You tell her the truth, she probably can't. Not because she's not smart, but because she's not allowed. There are exceptions, of course. Some women rise high. Priestesses, landowners, even pharaohs. The name Hatshepsut echoes in temple halls, though always with a whisper of discomfort. A woman on the throne is seen as a glitch in the cosmic order. A fluke. Merit asks about the statues of Hatshepsut with the false beard. She pretended to be a man? Merit says. You nod. Why? You hesitate. Then, because people only listened to her when they thought she was one. The answer sits heavy between you. Every morning, you watch Merit grow into herself. Her limbs lengthen. Her baby fat melts away. Her eyes sharpen with awareness. And you wonder, how long before the world starts to take things from her? Her childhood is chipped away in small, invisible ways. The first time someone comments on her budding chest. The first time a man looks too long. The first time she hears a joke she doesn't understand, but knows it's about her. And still, she plays. She dances to drum rhythms in the courtyard. She makes up songs about frogs and floods. She braids reeds into crowns and declares herself queen of the backyard canal. You let her have it. For now. But the women in your circle are already talking. About who she might marry. About what dowry she'll bring. About which family might want to combine bloodlines. Which sounds noble until you realize it's just a prettier way of saying, trade her for livestock. The pressure comes earlier than you expect. 10, maybe 11, and suddenly Merit isn't a child anymore. She's a young woman, which means she needs to act like one. Sit straighter. Speak softer. Think less. You catch her once, standing at the water basin, cupping her chest with both hands, staring at herself. You remember doing the same. Wondering what would change. What it would cost. There's a secret part of you that wants to tell her to run. Into the desert. Onto a boat. Away from everything that's coming. But instead, you straighten her shoulders and say, hold your head high. Because you know that the world won't make space for her unless she carves it herself. Historians note that Egyptian girls were often betrothed by their early teens. Marriage contracts spelled out what the husband owed, what the wife could claim if he divorced her, even who got the cat. On papyrus, It looks neat. Fair, even. But Merit won't be marrying a scroll. She'll be marrying a man. And you don't know who he is yet. One night, she curls up next to you under the reed roof and whispers, "I want to be like you." And your heart both breaks and swells. Because she sees your strength, not your sacrifice. She sees your care, not your exhaustion. She doesn't know yet how heavy the role is that she's walking into. So you hold her close, press your lips to her forehead, and whisper a prayer to Taurit, goddess of mothers. You ask for time. Just a little more. Before the world pulls her from your arms and into the life waiting for her, like a net tossed into the Nile. And then one morning, it happens. Not with thunder or trumpets, just a stain. Merit's first blood. You notice it before she does, on the linen she folds from the laundry pile. A faint rust-colored bloom, shy but unmistakable. Your heart stutters. Here it is, the beginning of everything and the end of everything else. You call her inside gently. You light incense so the room smells sweet, and not like fear. She sits cross-legged, a little confused, chewing on the corner of a fig. And then you tell her. She listens quietly, eyes wide, face unreadable. When you finish, she says, "Does this mean I'm a woman now?" You nod. She shrugs. "Can I still play?" The question makes you laugh and cry all at once. You tell her yes, but you both know it's not entirely true. Because now, the village sees her differently. One drop of blood, and the entire social machine shifts around her like a crocodile circling prey. In ancient Egypt, menstruation wasn't exactly a celebrated event. There are medical papyri that discuss it, mostly as a symptom or a cause of illness. If the blood does not come, one text advises, boil garlic and oil and insert. Well, you can imagine. Not a lot of gentle guidance. Just remedies and rules. You teach Merit the real instructions, the ones passed down from women, not scribes. Use soft linen rags. Burn them after. Bury the ashes. Don't swim during your bleed days unless you want to invite the eye of Sobek. Oh, and if you dream of fish during your cycle, it means pregnancy is likely the next month. Probably not true, but you still pass it on. That's what mothers do. Historians still argue how menstruation affected a woman's purity status in ancient Egyptian religion. Some say it rendered her ritually unclean, barred from temples and shrines. Others suggest Egyptian deities were more chill about it than, say, their Mesopotamian neighbors. But temple records are vague on the female body's messier moments. In practice, you handle it the way your mother did. Quietly, efficiently, and with a sense of weary reverence. Bleeding means life. It also means vulnerability. You begin to notice the stares. Not from her peers, they're still chasing lizards and playing with sticks. But from older boys, men, even your neighbor's sour uncle who suddenly has reason to stop by for figs every few days. You feel your jaw clench. It's one of the crueler realities of girlhood here. Her body will change, but the protection she's offered won't. If anything, it thins out. A girl must guard herself now. From gossip, from glances, from accidents that no one believes were accidental. So you teach her other things, too. How to read a man's tone when his words sound innocent. How to sidestep a touch without starting a scandal. How to keep her dignity in a society where that word can mean keeping quiet. Merit isn't dumb. She understands more than she says. And one day, while helping you sort lentils, she asks, "What if I don't want to get married?" You pause, fingers still. The sun beats down through the roof slats, baking the room in its dry hush. You could lie. You could say, "You don't have to." Or you could say what's true, that wanting has little to do with it. So you go for a middle road. You say, some women stay single. Some go to temples. But most marry, eventually. Why? Because that's what's expected. She chews on that for a while. Doesn't ask more. But her silence is thick with resistance. There's an old, fringe superstition among your people. If a girl cries on her first blood day, her marriage will be filled with sorrow. You remember crying. You never told your mother. Merit doesn't cry. She just sharpens her reed pen and writes her name in the dirt outside. That's how you know she's not going to make this easy for anyone. You want to cheer. You also want to weep. From now on, her world tightens like a net. The games disappear. The expectations appear, big as statues. She must walk with grace. Speak with modesty. Sit properly, even on the floor. Her hips are a scandal now, even in loose linen. You adjust the way you dress her. Darker colors. More fabric. You tie her headscarf tighter. She rolls her eyes, but lets you do it. The last gasps of girlhood slipping out of reach. One evening, the village midwife stops by. Not to help, just to observe. She comments on Merit's posture. Says things like, she'll bear strong sons. You want to throw her into the granary. Because now that Merit is fertile, she's no longer a person, she's potential. A womb. A dowry. A bargaining chip in conversations that never include her voice. So you sit with her that night, under the stars, beside the garden where nothing grows right now. And you do what mothers have done for centuries. You make her a promise you're not sure you can keep. I will protect you, you whisper. Even if it means saying no to the village elders. Even if it means turning down good matches. Even if it means being labeled difficult. Because this isn't just about you anymore. It's about her future. And if her path is going to be hard, you'll walk beside her every step. She leans her head on your shoulder and yawns. And in that soft, sleepy moment, she is still your little girl. But the tide is already turning. You feel it in your bones. In your belly. In the way the moon hangs just a little too full tonight. The mornings grow heavier. The chatter around the village walls shifts, from, whose daughter is she? To, when will they marry her off? You hear it in the way the fish vendor calls Merit flowering, a word that makes your stomach churn. You hear it in the pauses between greetings, in the way even the old potter tries not to look too long. And you feel it, everywhere. The countdown. The truth is, in ancient Egypt, girls didn't have much say when it came to marriage. Sure, technically, consent was part of the process. Technically. But reality. Reality leans on girls like a sandstone block. Pressing. Cornering. By 12 or 13, many girls were engaged, sometimes to boys their own age, but more often to men twice their size and age, with twice the land and 10 times the ego. You remember how it happened to your cousin Saitra. One morning, she was jumping off clay bricks, pretending to be a falcon. That afternoon, she was told she'd marry a weaver from 3 villages away. A widower. She cried so hard her nose bled. They told her it was just nerves. Merit isn't crying. Not yet. But she sees the signs. She sees how you dodge the merchant's questions. She hears you mutter when the matchmaker strolls past. She watches you count coins and try not to look worried. She's getting older. And you're running out of excuses. There's a peculiar tradition in some households, kind of a trial run. A girl wears a special headscarf for 7 days, signaling she's ready for marriage offers. Like a clearance sign dangling from her braid. You haven't given Merit that scarf yet. But you've caught her trying it on behind the curtain. Historians still argue whether girls had any formal role in choosing their husbands. Some say a willing nod was enough to approve a match. Others argue it was just ceremonial, like giving a dog permission to bark. You'd like to believe Merit would get a say. But belief is slippery here. The priest's sister, Thene, gives you a lecture during market day. She's of age, she says, pointing to Merit with her basket of onions. Don't wait too long. A girl unwed too long starts drawing whispers. Whispers. The weapon of every small town. You smile politely, but inside, your hands are fists. Because marriage isn't just about 2 people. It's about land. Lineage. Livestock. It's about consolidating ties between families, smoothing over debts, filling empty cradles and empty fields. Love isn't in the top 10 list. You remember your own wedding. You remember how the clay pots rattled when your husband's procession arrived. How the music sounded more like a warning than a celebration. You remember how your mother's eyes didn't quite meet yours as she adjusted your veil. And now it's your turn to look away. Except, you don't. Not yet. You talk to Merritt instead. One evening, you sit by the riverbank, feet in the muddy edge, watching frogs glide like gossip. What kind of husband would you want? You ask. She shrugs. One who lets me be quiet sometimes. That's all. That's her one wish. Not a prince. Not a rich man. Just someone who doesn't talk over her. You file it away like a sacred oath. There's a local fringe belief that if a girl carves her name into a tamarisk tree under a full moon, she'll dream of her future husband's face. Merritt tries it. The next morning, she says she dreamed of a donkey in a wig. You tell her that sounds about right. But jokes aside, the pressure builds. A scribe's nephew stops by with dried figs one afternoon. He's about 16, kind eyes, nervous laugh. His father hints at discussions. You're not convinced. Neither is Merritt. He says he likes poetry, she tells you later, unimpressed. But he only quoted his own. You both groan. Still, you can't stop the parade. Each week brings a new suggestion. The baker's cousin. The brewer's apprentice. A minor priest with a forehead like a hippo. One by one, they file past. And one by one, you make excuses. She's still learning to weave. We're waiting for the next flood. Her dreams haven't spoken yet. But the real reason? You're not ready. She's not ready. And neither of you wants to give away her last thread of freedom without a fight. There's something people don't say about marriage in ancient Egypt, that even the good ones were still deals struck in shadowy rooms. Contracts signed in trust but enforced with silence. Marriage wasn't just a bed and shared bread, it was surrender. Especially for girls. Yes, a woman could keep her own property. Technically, yes, she could initiate divorce. On papyrus, she was powerful. But inside the home, inside the day-to-day, she had to negotiate for kindness. She had to hope her husband wasn't cruel, or at least not cruel often. You try to explain this to Merritt without frightening her. You say things like, look for kindness, and trust your belly. But what you really want to say is, don't let them shrink you. And what you really want to say to the village is, she's more than her hips and her household potential. And what you really want to say to the gods is, please let her be happy. But you say none of that. You just keep stirring the stew. You keep braiding her hair. You keep holding back the flood of worry behind your smile. Because the moment is coming. Soon, someone will make an offer you can't refuse. Maybe it'll be a generous dowry. Maybe it'll be a family with connections. Maybe you'll just get tired of saying no. And when that moment comes, you'll have to decide. Do you let the tide carry her? Or do you teach her to swim against it, even if it pulls both of you under? The offer arrives wrapped in sweetness. Literally, dates, figs, even a wedge of imported honeycomb from up the Nile. You know the moment you see the basket that it isn't a gift. It's a lure. The man's name is Hormheb. He's older, at least 30. Widower. Owns a few cows, some barley fields, a 2-room home near the canal. Respectable, if boring. His sister brings the offer in person, beaming like she's done you a favor. You nod politely, fingers tightening on the basket rim. Merritt watches from the threshold, unreadable. You know this pattern too well. Widowed man, still young enough to want children, looking for a fresh wife to restart the cycle. He needs someone fertile, compliant, capable. He doesn't need a partner, he needs a vessel. You don't say yes. But you don't say no either. That night, you and Merritt sit under the stars again, the silence between you thick as honeycomb wax. I don't want him, she says. You nod. He smells like pickled fish, she adds. You smile at that, but your stomach's in knots. Because Hormheb's offer is generous. More than generous. Enough food to last 2 seasons. A new roof for the granary. A necklace of real lapis lazuli. And, he insists, he'll wait a year before consummation, to let the girl adjust. Oh, how noble of him. But here's the thing, even in ancient Egypt, consent wasn't entirely a foreign concept. In some surviving marriage contracts, a woman's property rights are explicitly protected. She could even divorce her husband, in theory, by simply declaring it before witnesses. There are scrolls where women clearly walked away and took their dowries with them. And yet, the cultural undercurrent is something else entirely. A girl who says, no, too loudly? She's troublesome. Difficult. A risk. Historians still argue whether these rights applied equally across all social classes. It's easy to write progressive policies for nobles and priestesses. It's another thing entirely for farmers and weavers, people like you and Merit. Your family has no land of its own. You rent your field. You patch your sandals twice before replacing them. So Hormheb's offer is not just about marriage. It's a lifeline. And everyone knows it. The pressure starts rolling in from all sides. The market women nod and say, he seems stable. The midwife reminds you that girls fade fast after 14. Even the local scribe casually drops, it's rare for a man to wait a full year. He must be very respectful. You don't ask how he knows that. And Merit? She starts disappearing behind her eyes. Quiet. Not sad, just far away. Like a little boat you can still see, but can't reach. You try to find another way out. Maybe temple work. Some girls, especially those with education or connections, could join temple life. Serve as chantresses, musicians, or attendants to Hathor or Isis. But Merit? She doesn't sing. And she doesn't want to spend her life grinding barley flour for priestesses with more eyeliner than empathy. The temples are full anyway. You know this is a dead end. There's a strange old belief, whispered among older women, that if a girl drops 3 pomegranate seeds into a crocodile's mouth without getting bitten, she'll never be forced into a marriage. You don't try it. Mostly because pomegranates are expensive, and crocodiles don't take appointments. So what do? You wait. You stall. You buy time like it's grain before the flood. And in that time, you see Merit shift. She stops pretending to be a girl. She starts learning to carry water pots on her head. She takes over morning chores without complaint. She watches you more closely, like she's memorizing you before things change. And the truth is, she's preparing. Not because she accepts the marriage, but because she knows the system. Because somewhere deep in her, she's already calculating how to bend it to her will. The morning Hormheb visits in person, she sits through the conversation with her hands folded, her gaze calm. He praises her manners. Says she'll make a fine little mother. Calls her pretty, in a plain way. You almost punch him. But you don't. Because you've been trained too well. After he leaves, you expect Merit to cry. To shout. To run. Instead, she says, he's not smart enough to notice if I'm lying. That gives you pause. What would you lie about? She looks you dead in the eyes. Everything. And suddenly, there it is, that wild spark of ancient Egyptian womanhood. The kind that doesn't ask permission, it just survives. Cleverly. Quietly. With a grin under the veil. Because make no mistake, Egyptian women, even the most oppressed, were not passive. They were adapters. Tricksters. Survivors. They used gossip like weapons. They played dumb when it served them. They made allies in the kitchen and cut enemies down with etiquette. So maybe Merit will marry Hormheb. Maybe she won't. But you get the sense that either way, she's going to find a crack in the wall and start chipping at it with a hairpin. She's her mother's daughter, after all. The date is set. It's not official yet, no contract inked, no gifts exchanged, but the village has made up its mind. Hormheb is the groom. Merit is the bride. And you You're the silent mother watching the sand slip through the hourglass. It's funny how quickly a rumor becomes reality. One day it's just maybe, the next, women are asking about wedding dresses and dowries like the ink's already dry. You want to scream. Instead, you smile and make bread. Preparations begin. Not yours, his. Hormheb's family starts collecting linens, carving wooden boxes, polishing a chipped perfume jar like it's gold. He walks through the village straighter now. Like he's already earned her. Merit still isn't crying. But she's also stopped laughing. You miss her laughter like missing a tooth. There's a space where something used to be, and now every smile feels a little lopsided. You try talking to the local priest, hoping, maybe, there's a loophole. Maybe the gods can delay this. Maybe he'll say she's spiritually unready. Instead, he nods solemnly and tells you, it's her duty to her household. Oh, that word again. Duty. It sneaks into everything. Duty to your parents. Duty to the gods. Duty to the land. Nobody ever asks what your duty is to yourself. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian women had full control over marriage contracts. Papyrus evidence shows some level of legal agency, but the day-to-day? That's murkier. The temples favored male scribes. The courts favored social order. And girls? Girls were often the paper, not the pen. On paper, Merit could negotiate a clause in her contract to keep her personal property. She could technically make her husband promise not to take additional wives. She could even, in theory, initiate divorce if mistreated. But who would believe her? Because the daily courts didn't run on justice, they ran on who had connections, who had land, who had clout. And Hormheb, for all his stinky fish aura, has clout. You feel it when the midwife avoids eye contact, when the neighbors start speaking of Merit in the past tense. She was such a bright girl. She used to dance at festivals. She's not dead yet, you want to say. But she's close. At least, the version of her who was free. One night, you find her staring at the moon, quietly rubbing sand between her fingers like she's counting down. You can say no, you whisper. She doesn't look at you. Can I? She asks. And there it is, the heavy pause, the question women have carried since time began. Can I? Would anyone believe me? Defend me? Let me live if I ran? And your silence is answer enough. Still, she's planning. You see it in the way she sharpens her words. In the way she starts asking quiet questions. Do you know if he sleeps early? Does he pray at sunrise or sunset? What does his sister hate? You pretend not to notice, but inside, you're proud. She's mapping a battlefield. And that's the thing no one tells you. Being a wife in ancient Egypt was often a form of tactical espionage. You were expected to keep house, raise children, and smile. But beneath that, women developed entire underground economies of secrets and favors. Need extra grain during a short harvest? Better hope your neighbor likes your pomegranate jam. Want a healer to come quickly during childbirth? Better hope you helped her daughter stitch linens last year. You teach Merit some of this. Quiet lessons. How to smile with your eyes while saying no. How to hide a second loaf of bread under a stool. How to turn silence into power. There's a story, half myth, half truth, about a woman named Nefru who poisoned her husband with crushed date pits after he tried to beat her into submission. The village called her cursed. The women called her clever. Merit knows that story. She's been whispering it to the chickens. And there's one last thing. The wedding itself. Ancient Egyptian weddings weren't always grand affairs. Often, they were simple transitions. No grand ceremony, no priest, just a move-in day and a contract. A gift from the groom, a few words, and suddenly a girl became a wife. But wealthier families? Oh, they had feasts. Music. Painted eyes and henna'd feet. You've been to those. You danced once, long ago, under lanterns shaped like lotus blooms. That won't be Merit's fate. Hormheb doesn't believe in extra spending. Still, The village insists on some kind of celebration. So you're tasked with preparing the bride's trousseau, linen wraps, combs, maybe a small perfume vial if you can trade for it. You use old cloth from your wedding bundle, cut and dyed anew. It's symbolic. Also, it's cheaper. Merit tries it on in front of the bronze mirror. She turns sideways, then faces you. "Do I look like someone's wife?" she asks. You look at her. "No," you say. "You look like someone pretending to be." And she smiles, just a little. That old crooked smile, sharp and wide and brave. You wonder how many girls before her wore that same expression, knowing they were walking into a cage with their eyes open, already hunting for the loose nail in the door. The week before the wedding, Merit comes to you with a plan. She whispers it all, step by step. You listen, and you do not interrupt. When she's done, you nod once. Not because it's perfect. Not because it's safe. But because it's hers. You won't stop the marriage. But you won't let it stop her either. Because maybe, just maybe, she's not the one who should be afraid. Maybe Hormheb should watch his step. The morning of the wedding comes without ceremony. There's no priest. No music. Just a rooster that sounds drunk and a sun already too bright for comfort. You wake before it, nerves fluttering like moths in your chest. Merit is already dressed, already combing her hair with the little bronze comb you polished for the occasion. She doesn't look nervous. She looks like someone preparing for battle. You hand her a strip of dried dates. She takes it like a soldier takes a ration. Outside, the neighbors begin to stir. One of the midwives comes to bless the doorway, not out of belief, but tradition. The blessing is short. You can tell she wants to be somewhere else. The house is quiet. Too quiet. You remember your own wedding. The scent of jasmine. The pressure of your mother's hands on your shoulders. The moment you realized, just a breath too late, that you had been handed off like a parcel. A pretty, hopeful parcel with no return policy. Merit doesn't say much. But before she leaves, she turns to you. "Whatever happens," she says, "don't be sorry." You nod. And she goes. Hormheb's house isn't far. A 10-minute walk if your feet are fast. The wedding procession is a joke. Just his sister and 2 goats tied with scraps of dyed linen. But that's all the law requires. A witness, a gift, and a home to move into. One papyrus scroll with the right symbols, and suddenly a girl becomes someone's legal responsibility. Historically, that scroll, the marriage contract, could actually be surprisingly detailed. It might promise provisions, protection, property. Some even included fines if the husband took another wife or failed to provide. Ancient Egypt wasn't lawless. But laws are only as strong as the people willing to enforce them. And in small villages like yours, enforcement is selective, convenient. Merit enters the house. The door closes. You sit outside your own door, hands in your lap. Waiting. Minutes pass. Then more. You expect a messenger. A note. A scream. But nothing. The day stretches on, golden and quiet. And that's when things start to feel strange. By midday, Hormheb's sister returns. Alone. She looks flustered. Says nothing. Just hurries past. By evening, the goats are gone. The house is silent. You pretend not to notice. Pretend not to hear the whispers. And then, at dusk, Merit appears. She's barefoot. Smiling. You blink. Did it happen? You ask. She shrugs. Some of it. She doesn't elaborate. She doesn't need to. Because you know. Somehow, someway, Merit took that plan she whispered and made it real. Later, you learn snippets. That she stalled the ceremony with talk of missing scrolls. That she told Hormheb she'd seen a bad omen, a bird striking his roof beam. That she, accidentally, burned his offering bread and whispered it was a curse. That she refused to enter the marriage chamber until the moon rose, because Isis would be angry otherwise. And he bought it. He waited, and waited, and then left to consult the priest. He hasn't returned since. Some say he went north to speak with temple scribes. Others say he's embarrassed, hiding. One particularly bold neighbor claims he was cursed by an angry house spirit and fled. The truth only Merit knows. But you just sit by the fire, watching her sort lentils like nothing happened. There's a tradition among village women. If a bride returns unclaimed, untouched, and undiscussed, no one presses. She's given time, space, a sort of informal grace period. That's where Merit is now, hovering in that sacred limbo between girlhood and womanhood, untethered by title. And while the elders quietly mutter about bad omens, you see something else: strategy. Egyptian women were often mythologized as magical, dangerous. There are countless stories of divine mothers and wicked enchantresses, Sekhmet, Batet, Isis herself, who wielded power not through brute force, but through wit, through silence, through suggestion. Merit leaned into that. She turned her fear into fog and let Hormheb get lost in it. You hear she's being called cursed now. You laugh. Because it's not a curse, it's freedom wrapped in a rumor. Historians still debate how much autonomy Egyptian women really had when it came to escaping marriage. Some argue that clever manipulation of religious beliefs gave women leverage in situations where law failed them. Others think those stories are just moral tales, exceptions, not rules. But you're watching an exception become a new rule. And you realize, maybe this is what survival looks like now. Not fighting, not fleeing, but bending the system until it cracks just enough to slip through. In the weeks that follow, Merit isn't shunned. She isn't praised, either. She simply is. A girl who dodged a marriage and still walks tall. The village adjusts. Even Hormheb's sister stops scowling eventually. The best part? Someone else tries the bad omen excuse a few months later. And suddenly, you're not the only house with a daughter who's delayed. Merit's story becomes legend. Not a loud one. A quiet one. The kind that travels behind baskets of bread, under veils, between women's glances. And every time someone asks what really happened, you just smile and say, the gods work in mysterious ways. And in a way, they do. Because this is a miracle. Not the flashy kind. Just the kind where a girl walks away from the edge and lives to laugh about it. You think it's over. You think the crisis has passed and the gods, in their strange desert wisdom, have decided to spare your daughter from the worst of it. But ancient Egypt, like any ancient place, is a land of cycles, Nile floods, crop seasons, gossip loops. And just when you start breathing easy again, the wheel turns. Because nothing in Egypt really disappears. Not people. Not rumors. And certainly not men like Hormheb. One morning, you hear it. His name, dropped casually at the edge of the marketplace like a scorpion in a fruit basket. Someone saw him. No, not here, in the city. Maybe Memphis. Maybe further north. The story is vague, but the message is clear. He's not gone. He's plotting. And Merit? She's back to watching the moon again. The problem with surviving something like that is you don't get to relax. You get to wait. Constantly. For retaliation. For a second strike. For the gods, or your enemies, to notice they missed their chance and come back swinging. Historians still argue whether spurned grooms had legal grounds to demand marriage, especially in small communities. Some texts suggest contracts could be voided quietly. Others imply families could sue for lost honor. But either way, one thing is certain. In the absence of a legal system built for fairness, power steps in. And Hormheb's family still holds a lot of that. They don't come to your door. No threats. No curses scrawled on the lintel. Just looks. Long, heavy, simmering stares whenever you fetch water or bring onions to trade. And worse, no offers. No other families come knocking for Merit. She's tricky now. Too clever. Bad luck. Never mind that she saved herself from a miserable future. In the eyes of the village, she's tainted, not by what she did, but by how well she did it. There's a type of courage people find inspiring in stories and threatening in real life. Merit lives in that space now. You try not to show your worry. Instead, you double your trade routes. Smile more at neighbors. Offer to mend someone's tunic without asking for bread in return. You smooth the wrinkles, socially speaking. But Merit? She refuses to shrink. She spends more time by the river, sometimes helping the washerwomen, sometimes just watching. She begins sketching symbols into the clay when no one's looking, ancient signs for protection, for transformation. Once, you catch her whispering over a jar of honey, placing a reed blossom inside and sealing it with wax. "What's that for?" you ask. "Insurance," she says. You don't ask again. In a land where magic and medicine often blurred, women, especially unmarried ones, were quietly expected to know a little of both. You remember this from your youth. Midwives doubling as herbalists. Aunts who could read dreams or make a cold disappear with a charm and a spit. One of the strangest but true facts. Ancient Egyptians sometimes used crocodile dung as a contraceptive, mixed with honey and inserted like a barrier. Gross. Absolutely. Effective. Questionable. But the point was control. Women trying to gain some shred of agency over their lives. And Merit is clearly collecting knowledge like weapons. You don't stop her. Because deep down, you may have delayed her fate, but you didn't erase it. Eventually, Hormheb will return. Or someone worse will take his place. And this time, Merit wants to be ready. There's a visiting trader one week, a man with silver earrings and cracked heels who's rumored to have come from the edge of Nubia. He sells herbs, spices, and odd talismans made from bones and shells. Merit lingers near his cart. You watch from a distance as she hands over a small bead and takes something wrapped in linen. She slips it into her dress like it's nothing. Like it's everything. Later you ask, gently, "Do I need to worry?" She smiles. "Only if he comes back." There's bravery in her tone. But you also hear the weariness. Because being a woman in ancient Egypt means always having to prepare. Even when nothing's wrong. Especially when nothing's wrong. You cook meals like they're armor. You braid your hair with intention, in case someone misreads your silence. You keep your back straight when walking alone, because posture is the only thing between you and being someone's next possession. It's exhausting. And Merit, for all her boldness, is not immune. One night, you find her crying. She doesn't try to hide it. "Do you think I broke myself?" she asks. You sit beside her, stare at the wall flickering with lamplight. "No," you say. "I think you dodged a trap and now you're just sore from the fall." She laughs, a hiccup of sound. Then she says, "I don't think anyone's going to want me." And that's when you feel it. Hot, sharp anger at a world that punishes girls not for failing, but for surviving too visibly. You wrap your arms around her and whisper, "Wanting you isn't the point. You're not a goat at market. But what if I want someone?" And there it is. The real fear. Not just isolation. But that she's bought her freedom at the cost of love. That the only way to be safe is to be alone. You have no easy answer. Because sometimes, in ancient Egypt, that's exactly what it meant. You think of Isis, goddess of motherhood and magic, who roamed the earth searching for her dead husband Osiris, who stitched him back together out of love and grief. Some say that's what love is, a relentless, painful patchwork. But others say Isis was foolish. That she gave too much. Merit will have to decide which version to believe. For now, you hold her. For now, you breathe with her. And for now, that's enough. The wind changes. It's not something you can name at first. Not a gust or a sandstorm, just a shift in how people look at you. At her. Fewer stares now. Fewer mutters. A neighbor offers you leftover lentils without adding a comment about Merit's situation. A woman with 4 daughters asks if Merit might help with harvest sowing. And most curious of all, A priest from the temple visits. He says he's checking on the unmarried women of the district. You want to laugh. He's never checked on them before. But you smile politely and offer him beer, and he asks Merit about her handwriting. About her time at the scribal school when she was younger. She answers with just the right blend of humility and knowledge. Enough to make him nod. Later, when he leaves, she tells you the real reason he came. They're recruiting girls again. For the House of Life. Now that makes you drop your clay bowl. The House of Life, per Ankh, isn't a literal house, of course. It's part temple, part school, part archive. Mostly reserved for male scribes and healers, but every few years, they invite a few women. Especially when a priesthood is low on births or a temple needs sacred singers, healers, or record keepers. It's not freedom, exactly. But it's the closest thing to safety some girls ever get. Still, the price is steep. You'd be giving her to the gods. Literally. She'd live at the temple, wear linen robes, follow purity codes, perhaps even take vows. She could learn medicine, study stars, translate spells from the Book of the Dead. But she'd never marry, never have children, never leave without permission. A gilded cage. But a cage, nonetheless. Merit's eyes shine when she talks about it. You, on the other hand, feel like you're watching a second marriage unfold. Because that's what this is, isn't it? Another binding. Another scroll. Another life carved into something unrecognizable because the alternative is worse. And yet, this time, it's her choice. That changes everything. Historically, women in ancient Egypt did serve as priestesses, musicians, even doctors, especially during the Middle Kingdom. Some were midwives attached to temples. Others were scribes of lesser gods or even keepers of family records for elite households. It wasn't common, but it wasn't unheard of. And it beat being someone's neglected third wife. Merit doesn't decide right away. She walks more, talks less, writes names in the dust with her toe, over and over. Her own. Isis. Seshet, the goddess of writing. Sometimes even Batet, the feline goddess of protection and balance. One day, you find her weaving a tiny basket. Not for storage. Too small. It's for dreams, she says. You put things in it that you want to keep close. And you realize, this isn't about religion. It's about control. She wants a world with structure she can survive in. She wants rules that make sense. A future that doesn't depend on some man's temper or some uncle's business deal. So you say what she's too scared to ask. I'll be okay. She looks at you, eyes wide, mouth trembling. Even if you leave, you continue. Even if you're gone from this house. I'll be okay. She doesn't cry. She just folds the basket shut and sets it on the hearth. A decision is made. The night before she's supposed to present herself to the temple scribe, you prepare her like it's a wedding. You braid her hair with rose petals and smear her wrists with myrrh. You dust her sandals with white chalk and stitch a small prayer into the hem of her tunic. Nothing grand, just a plea to Thoth, god of knowledge. Let her mind stay sharp. Let her words be heard. She doesn't speak much. But before bed, she asks you to hold her like you did when she was 5 and afraid of jackals. So you do. In the morning, she goes. Not with fanfare. No parade of goats this time. Just a donkey cart with a canopy and a driver who smells like fish. She climbs in. She doesn't look back. You don't wave. Because waving feels too final. Instead, you stand there long after the dust has settled. And then, very slowly, you return inside. Historians still argue about how fulfilling temple life really was for women. Some point to letters full of joy and pride. Others describe temple hierarchies as just another set of male-run rules dressed in linen and gold. But what is clear is that for some women, it offered rare power. Access to books, herbs, incantations, maps, and stars. For Merit, that's enough. You keep her room exactly the same. You dust the basket on the hearth once a week. And when someone asks where she is, you say, she's studying. She's exactly where she needs to be. Some people scoff. Others nod with envy. Because in a world where being born a girl is almost a sentence, Merit found the loophole. It's not perfect, but it's hers. You're not surprised when the first letter arrives. It's clumsy at first, more symbols than words, like she's trying to fit everything she's learned into too small a space. But it's undeniably Merit, sharp, curious, occasionally snarky. She draws a little cat in the corner and calls it her scribal guardian. You smile, trace the ink with your thumb. She writes about waking up before sunrise, chanting with the other novices, how the head scribe smells like onions and regrets. She describes the scrolls she's allowed to copy, rituals for the afterlife, poems to Hathor, even anatomical diagrams of the human liver. Apparently we have 5, she jokes. At least according to this guy. You don't reply on papyrus, you can't afford it. But you send small tokens. Dried figs, a lock of your hair. One of her old bracelets she thought was lost. You wrap them in linen and let the temple couriers deliver them with the weekly offerings. Weeks pass, then months, and you get used to the rhythm of it. Used to the stillness in the house. To the way the mornings feel a little too wide now. You try to keep busy, selling reeds, helping an elderly neighbor with her garden, patching a roof with some teenagers who need a reason to behave. But some nights, it hits you. You lie awake, staring at the roof, counting heartbeats and beetles and wondering if you made the right choice. Because being a woman in ancient Egypt doesn't end when your daughter escapes marriage. You're still here. Still surviving. Still judged for being alone. Especially now. Without Merit, people look at you differently. There's pity in their voices. That dreaded, sticky sweetness. Such a shame she never had more children. Must be hard, all alone in that house. You smile through it. You always do. But it's harder now. And the worst part? You understand why they say it. Because they're afraid of ending up like you. The single woman. The one who didn't secure a legacy. The one with a daughter who belongs to the gods. And when the Nile floods this year, just a bit too high, your roof leaks, and the neighbors whisper that perhaps your household is off balance. Historically, single women in ancient Egypt weren't outcasts, but they were rare. Most women married young and often remarried quickly if widowed. The idea of a woman managing a household alone was not scandalous, but it was unconventional. And unconventional almost always meant suspect. You learn to walk differently. Not faster. Just steadier. More deliberate. You keep your hair neat. Your tunic mended. You speak with confidence, but never too loudly. You become precise. It's not fear. Not really. It's discipline. The discipline of a woman who knows that survival is performance. That every gesture is a prayer or a challenge, depending on who's watching. And then one evening, just before the moon turns full, Merit's second letter arrives. It's shorter, but deeper. She writes about a healing ritual she assisted with, how a child came in with fever and left with breath steadier than a temple bell. She mentions the old spells she's learned, the way they sound in her mouth like songs she forgot she knew. And she says, at the end, I'm starting to feel like me. Not the girl who almost married Hormheb. Not the girl who ran. Not even the daughter of a clever mother. Just herself. And it stings, a little. Not in a bad way. In the way that all parents feel when the child they raised becomes someone separate. Whole. But there's one line that stays with you most. Sometimes I still wish I had a sister. But maybe this version of me, this new version, doesn't need one. You sit with that for a long time. You picture the daughter you might have had, the soft one, the quiet one, the one who wouldn't fight back. And you realize you're glad she doesn't exist. You're glad Merit is Merit. Fringe historians sometimes speculate that temple women formed deep emotional bonds, chosen sisterhoods, even romantic attachments, not recorded in official scrolls. Most of it is theory, based on poetry and speculation. But you like to imagine Merit finding someone in those halls who looks at her the way you do, with pride and patience. There's comfort in that. More weeks pass, and you hear that Hormheb never returned. Rumor has it he left for Syria, or died in a skirmish, or drank himself sick in a tavern outside Thebes. No one's quite sure, and no one cares anymore, because time in Egypt is long and winding and not particularly sentimental. People forget. Temples rise and fall, and daughters grow into something more than anyone ever expected. One night, as you're preparing oil for trade, a neighbor passes by and says, "Your girl's in the stars now." You blink. What? He grins, half-teeth. Scribe saw her name. On a copy of the hymn to the sun signed it, she did. Proper formal scribe's mark. You feel your breath catch. Because that means she's not just training. She's writing. She's being remembered. Not as someone's wife. Not as a failed betrothal. But as herself. A scribe. A voice. A woman who, by all accounts, shouldn't have had that chance. And you think about how many women are buried beneath names they never chose. How many histories are told through the eyes of husbands, fathers, pharaohs. And here's Merit, slipping past all of them, in ink. You light a small lamp. Hold it up. Whisper her name into the flame. And watch it glow. Because maybe that's all legacy is, a story you keep telling. Until someone writes it down. You don't see Merit again for 2 full years. Which is not unusual. Temple novices are bound by cycles, training, purity, festival preparation. She's busy. You understand. But still, each season feels a little longer than it should. The floodwaters rise and fall, the market stalls change their spices, the wrinkles at the corners of your mouth deepen just a little more. And then, without warning, she arrives. No fanfare. No letter ahead of time. You just hear a knock at the door one early morning, as the light turns the dust in the air to gold, and there she is. At first, you don't even recognize her. She's taller. Thinner, maybe. Her linen robe is cleaner than anything you've worn in years, and her posture is unervingly perfect. There's a mark on her forehead, a small tattoo of the goddess Seshet, in black ink, right at her hairline. And her eyes, they're the same. Just sharper. "Hi," she says. You step aside without a word and let her in. It's awkward at first. She doesn't know where to sit. You don't know what to say. She stares at the hearth like it's sacred ground, then reaches down and picks up the basket she left behind. Still there. Still holding her dreams. You make her lentil soup. She eats 3 bowls. Then she starts talking. About the songs she's learned. The books she's copied. The funerary spells she memorized so perfectly they let her recite at the new moon vigil. She describes the different dialects of hieroglyphs. How the priests argue over whether a certain phrase should mean eternity or repetition. Historians still argue that, she adds, with a grin. You laugh harder than you have in months. She looks proud. Later, she takes your hands in hers, so steady now, and asks how you've been. You lie, of course. Say business is good. Say the roof's fixed. Say you've got more customers than time. She doesn't press. Just nods, like you both know the truth but aren't quite ready to face it. Instead, you walk together. Down by the river, where the reeds crackle underfoot and the frogs trill lazily in the shallows. You talk about nothing and everything, how someone painted the temple wall pink by accident, how your neighbor's goat has developed a mysterious taste for sandals, how the stars look different when you sleep alone. And then she tells you. She's not staying. You knew that. But hearing it still lands like a blow. She's returning to the temple. Not as a novice now, but as a junior scribe. With duties. A desk. A title. They're even giving her a room of her own. She says it like it's a triumph, and it is, but it still sounds like a wall going up. She promises to visit more. You nod. But you both know it won't happen often. Because her life is no longer here. And here's the secret no one tells you. Sometimes the hardest part of motherhood isn't letting go. It's surviving after they've gone. In ancient Egypt, the idealized image of the mother was everywhere, on steels, in tomb art, even in temple hymns. But the real lives of older women, especially those without husbands or sons, are barely recorded. Their stories faded into dust unless their children became something memorable. You wonder how many mothers sat just like this, watching their daughters step into futures they themselves never dared to dream of. You tell her one thing before she leaves. Write something just for you. She tilts her head. What do you mean? I mean not for the temple, not for the gods, not even for the scrolls. Just something only you understand. And hide it. Somewhere safe. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't ask why. She just nods and tucks that advice away like a secret jewel. The next morning, she departs. She hugs you hard, but not long. She doesn't cry. Neither do you. You watch her walk away, again, but it feels different now. Not like losing something. Like sending something forward. Fringe tidbit for you. There's a theory, half lore, half wish, that some female scribes hid personal writings in temple walls. Not spells or records, but letters, poems, dreams. Words meant only for themselves, disguised in the margins of sacred texts. Most have never been found. But some might still be waiting. You go back inside. The silence doesn't hurt this time. You sweep the floor, gather the reeds, wash the dishes. You make a little offering at the hearth, not to a god, but to time, to the slow burn of years, to the invisible labor of women, to all the stories not carved in stone. And that night, when you lie down, you finally sleep deeply, because you realize something extraordinary. You raised a woman who refused to disappear. And somehow, that means you won't either. The days blur into one another again. But now the silence of your house has weight. It's not emptiness anymore. It's memory. And strangely, a kind of peace. You still walk to the river, still mend baskets, still trade oil for copper when you can. But everything feels gentler now, like the edge has been taken off. You've learned to live without the constant ache. Mostly. Until the statue arrives. You're just outside, brushing grain husks off your mat, when two porters shuffle down the dusty path to your home, hauling something wrapped in thick linen and smelling faintly of resin. They grunt, wipe their brows, and ask your name. When you confirm it, one of them grins and says, "You got friends in high places." They set it down and leave without another word. You unroll the linen slowly. Inside is a small carved statue of Seshet, goddess of wisdom and writing, her seven-petaled emblem carefully etched atop her headdress. It's not fancy, probably limestone, maybe with a little black coal in the eyes, but it's perfect. Balanced. Strong. Peaceful. There's a note, folded under the statue's base. For the woman who first taught me how to listen. Your throat tightens. You place the statue near your hearth, where the light touches it every morning. It's not an altar. Not exactly. But you find yourself whispering to it now and then. You don't say prayers. You just say thanks. Historians still argue whether Seshet had an actual cult following or was more of a symbolic figure, an administrative muse more than a worshipped goddess. But there are traces of small shrines to her, usually hidden inside temple libraries. Places where women, particularly scribes, would go to focus, to write. You like to imagine Merit standing in one of those. Eyes closed, pen in hand. Breathing slow and steady. Your neighbors notice the statue, of course. Gossip turns quickly. Her daughter must be someone important, they murmur. Maybe she's working for the pharaoh now. You don't correct them. You don't say anything at all. Because for once, you enjoy the feeling of being underestimated. Let them think what they want. You know the truth. And the truth is better. Still, life isn't easy. Food's tighter this season. The floods were thin, and the reeds have grown brown at the tips. You have to barter harder, make do with less. You skip meals sometimes, not out of desperation, just strategy. You know how to stretch rice and beans like a song you hum under your breath. But your bones creak louder than they used to. And when the rains don't come, the nights are colder than they have any right to be. You try not to dwell on it. You keep moving. Keep managing. Keep breathing. Because that's what women in your position do. They don't fall apart. They fold. Neatly. Quietly. And then they unfold again when the world isn't looking. One day, while trading in the market, you meet a girl who reminds you of Merit. Not in her face. No, she's taller, darker, more impatient, but in her fire. She argues with the seller over a papyrus scroll, waving her hands and quoting some ancient law about fair trade rates. You hide a smile behind your shawl. Later, you see her struggling to balance a jug on her shoulder. So you step in, without a word, and steady it. She looks at you like you're a magician. You feel 10 years younger. Turns out her name is Tepi. She's an orphan. Works for a baker who takes more bread than he pays. She's clever but doesn't read. Not yet. You ask if she wants to. She blinks. Then nods. So, you teach her. Not like a priest. Not like a scholar. Like a mother. And in doing so, something opens in you. A place you didn't know was waiting. It starts with a few letters. Names. Simple words. Then fragments of poetry. Quotes you half remember from Merit's old scribal notes. Tepi soaks it in like cloth in dye. You keep going. Because in ancient Egypt, knowledge wasn't just a gift. It was power. And power, especially for women, was currency. Rare. Risky. Worth every moment. There's even a theory, one you overheard once at the market, that women who could read were able to slip messages into tombs. Hide family histories in the walls. Even forge legal papers to protect land or children. No one's proved it. But the idea lingers. And you think, maybe this is what you're meant to do now. Not just remember Merit, but multiply her. It becomes your quiet revolution. One girl becomes 2, then 3. You never call it a school. You call it visiting. You sit outside, in the shade of your cracked house wall, and scribble letters in the dust with a stick. The girls repeat after you. They bring dates or clay pots in exchange, whatever they can. One girl brings dried lotus petals and says her mother used to make tea with them. You try it. It tastes like sunlight and memory. Some days you only get a sentence in. Some days you teach nothing at all. But they keep coming. And you keep opening the door. One evening, you find a tiny scroll tucked in your reed basket. Unmarked. Folded with care. Inside, a poem. A short one. A little clumsy. But beautiful. It's not signed. You don't need it to be. Because now, the silence in your home isn't loneliness. It's legacy. The moon is full tonight, casting a soft blue shimmer across your courtyard. You're awake, not from restlessness, but from habit. In your youth, this would have been the hour you stirred clay pots or wove reeds under starlight. But now, you simply sit with a blanket draped over your knees, the statue of Seshet at your side like an old friend who never interrupts. You listen to the hush of the wind pushing through the dry papyrus. You think about time. And how strange it is that you've outlived your usefulness, according to everyone but the girls. Tepi comes by more often now. Not just to learn. Sometimes she brings stories, like how she tricked a tax collector into lowering her master's dues by pretending she couldn't count past 20. You laughed so hard that your tea went cold. Other times she just sits with you, knitting reed chords while you murmur old temple rhymes. One day, she brings a small boy with her. My cousin, she says, a little too quickly. He's no cousin. You can tell. He clings to her leg and watches you like a fox in a lion's den. You give him a fig and say nothing. Tepi watches you teach him his first letter like you're performing magic. But what is magic, really? In ancient Egypt, the word was Heka, both a divine force and a practical skill. It wasn't about wands or chants. It was about knowing the hidden names of things, the secret codes in symbols, the power of knowing. And women, especially older women, were believed to possess certain kinds of Heka that others didn't. The kind that wasn't taught. The kind that grew. They called it wisdom. You just call it survival. Historians still argue whether elderly women in ancient villages held real status, or whether they were just tolerated. There are stories of widows being consulted for advice, healers, dream interpreters, even amateur matchmakers. But there are just as many tales of them being ignored, or worse, accused of bad air when crops failed. You've seen both. There was that time they blamed you for a spoiled batch of beer. Said your presence turned the yeast sour. You didn't bother defending yourself. You just stopped visiting that house. A week later, their water jar cracked in the sun. You didn't curse them, though you considered it. You still remember the girl who begged you for a protective amulet, whispering that her mother-in-law wanted her child gone. You didn't ask questions. You gave her a carved shell and told her to keep it tied around her waist until the baby kicked. When the child was born healthy, she named her Sephu, gentle wind. You liked to believe you had something to do with that. Not power. Not magic. Just presence. Just being here. And in this chapter of your life, yes, you're calling it a chapter now, you begin to understand something the younger you never could have imagined. Your worth isn't gone. It's just quieter. Like the Nile during planting season. Still, but essential. There's something else happening in the city, too. You hear whispers of a new queen, a powerful one. Not just the pharaoh's wife, but someone with actual authority. They say she wears a false beard and holds council in the early dawn, before the priests wake. Some say she's a threat. Others say she's the future. You don't know her name, but you like the idea of her. A woman ruling not from behind a curtain, but from the front of the line. It reminds you that for all the hardship, all the days of sweat and sacrifice, women in Egypt could still claw their way upward. Carefully, quietly, cleverly. There's a reason the goddess Marat, truth and balance herself, is always depicted with outstretched wings. Because it takes flight to survive the weight of this world. That night, you dream of Merit. She's older. Maybe your age now. She's sitting at a temple desk, surrounded by scrolls and shadows, writing something furiously by lamplight. You try to read it, but the words swim before your eyes. When you wake, your heart is racing. You wonder if she's dreaming of you, too. The next time Tepi comes over, you show her how to make ink. Not the black kind from the priests. A softer hue, from crushed petals and soot. She smudges her hands, curses under her breath, and makes you laugh so hard your ribs ache. Then, she asks something unexpected. Can I keep teaching after you? You freeze. Not because it's a strange question, but because it's the first time you've realized, she's already doing it. You nod. She nods back, solemnly. No ceremony. No grand declarations. Just one woman passing the thread to another. That night, you light an oil lamp by the statue and murmur a quiet thanks. Not a prayer. Just a recognition. Because somewhere along the road, being a woman in ancient Egypt stopped sucking quite so much. For someone, anyway. And maybe that's enough. You don't need monuments. You don't need songs. You just need one person to remember that you made things better. Even a little. Even for a moment. The mornings come slower now. You feel it in your joints, those quiet little protests as you swing your legs over the mat. Your knees whisper complaints, your back creaks like an old boat docked too long. You chuckle at the sounds. Still here, you mumble to yourself, as if your body needs the reminder. Outside, the air smells like wet stone. The Nile is rising again. It'll be a good season. You sit on your step, sipping a weak cup of barley tea, and watch the world shift. Children run past with reed kites, shouting things you can't quite catch. Tepi walks by with her Nata cousin, both of them carrying small bundles of papyrus. She waves. You nod. It's all part of the rhythm now. But even rhythms wear thin. You notice lately how your thoughts wander more than they used to. You'll start mending a mat, then stop halfway, holding a reed in your fingers like it might tell you a secret. Sometimes, you drift back into the past so vividly you forget where you are. You wake from these reveries blinking, trying to pin down what decade your body still belongs to. This is aging in ancient Egypt. A slow unraveling. Not tragic, just inevitable. And for women, it came with certain expectations. If you were lucky, you were cared for by family. Fed, bathed, respected, maybe even consulted. If not, well, let's just say some elders ended up sleeping near the goats. Not in cruelty, just practicality. Space and resources didn't stretch far. Historians still debate how common elder neglect truly was. Tomb paintings often depict multi-generational harmony, grandmothers with babies in their laps, matriarchs handing down recipes or charms. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find warning spells carved into doorways, wards against envy, sickness, even betrayal by kin. That kind of magic doesn't flourish in peaceful homes. You've heard the warnings whispered by other old women in the market. Don't become a burden. They'll stop seeing you. And once they stop seeing you, it's like you were never there. But in your case, they still see. One morning, Tepi arrives unannounced. No lesson today, she brings food. Bread warm from the coals, figs she swears were ripened by the gods themselves, and a little jar of honey. For you, she says, like it's nothing. You try to scold her for spending coin, but she cuts you off. You fed me first. It's funny how kindness circles back like that. Quietly. With figs. And it's not just her. Another girl stops by later, pressing a thin reed scroll into your hands. It's a story, she says, eyes down. About you. You unravel it carefully. The ink is faded, the lines clumsy, but the effort is unmistakable. A tale of a wise woman with dusty hands and fire in her belly, who teaches forgotten girls to read the stars. You cry harder than you mean to. Because it's not really about you, is it? It's about every woman who got scraped thin by duty, stretched between grief and grit, and still found a way to give. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a younger you is laughing. Not in mockery, just surprised. You never expected this ending. You figured you'd fade like so many others. Into dust, into myth, into nothing. But here you are. Still turning pages. You think about your mother sometimes. Not often. But enough. She died with cracked hands and a bitter tongue. You used to resent that. But now, you wonder if she had stories, too. If someone had listened. Maybe bitterness was just love with nowhere to go. You hope she's at peace. You hope someone whispered her name recently, even by accident. Because in ancient Egypt, names mattered. They were more than identity, they were memory. To speak a name was to keep a soul alive. That's why tombs were carved, why coffins bore spells, why even servants got their names etched in clay. Forget the name, and the person vanished. So, you speak names often now. Merit. Tepi. Your own. Not loudly. Just enough to stir the air. Your house is quieter these days, but it's never truly silent. There's always a knock, or a voice calling from beyond the garden wall, or a rustle of reed sandals outside your gate. You're not alone, even when you are. One evening, the local scribe stops by. He's young, dressed too finely, smells like date wine and sandalwood. You're the woman who teaches, he says, half curious, half skeptical. You nod. He glances around. Notices the statue of Seshet by your door. His eyes linger. He doesn't say anything else. But the next week, a bundle of papyrus arrives at your door. No note. Just tools. A gift. Your reputation has crept past the village walls. Maybe farther. Maybe someone whispered your story in the temple courts. Maybe someone read Tepi's scroll and passed it along. You'll never know. But isn't that the best part? letting go of control, trusting the ripples. You once feared becoming invisible. Now, you find comfort in it. Because invisibility is a form of freedom. No one expects anything from you anymore. So you can give everything. On your terms. The girls gather more frequently now. Some bring songs, some bring dreams. One girl wants to be a dancer. Another wants to write laws. You don't laugh. You just nod and say, "Good. The world needs that." They believe you. And so, for the first time, you believe you too. Your body may be weakening, but your voice isn't. That fire? Still there. You may not carry baskets or walk to the market anymore, but you carry something heavier, and far more valuable. The power to shape what comes next. And you do it with ink. With memory. With names. The final stretch of summer drapes itself over your home like a warm shroud. The Nile has begun its slow retreat, leaving behind a glistening skin of mud and possibility. You no longer walk to the river, but you hear it, soft and slow, like a lullaby sung by the earth. Your joints ache more now. Breathing sometimes feels like work. The mat beneath you grows thinner by the week, or maybe your bones grow sharper. Still, every morning you rise. Even if it's just to sit near the window, where the air moves like silk and the birds gossip in the reeds. And you write. You didn't expect that part to return. You thought the ink had dried, that the words had fled you for younger tongues. But they didn't. They just needed stillness. Time. An old woman's kind of patience. You scratch out short verses, memories disguised as riddles, quiet warnings to whoever might listen after you're gone. You write the names of every girl who passed through your doorway, everyone who sat cross-legged and asked, "Why me?" You write the answer, too. Because the world doesn't get better on its own. Because someone has to hold the line, even if her fingers are cracked and her eyes dim. Because stories matter. Especially when they come from someone no one expects. Historians still debate whether elderly women in ancient Egypt were literate. Most scribes were men, sure, but we know female scribes existed. Their names are rare, but they sparkle through the record like stars through clouded papyrus. Renpit Nofret, Hemet, Tia. Women who inscribed lists, copied hymns, maybe even wrote prayers of their own. Maybe you were never meant to be among them. But here you are, pen in hand. You do not need a title. You just need a voice. One evening, Tepi returns alone, her brow drawn low. "He's gone," she says softly, and you know who she means. Her not a cousin. The one with the wild eyes and hands always sticky from fruit. A fever, she tells you. Quick and cruel. You listen without speaking, your hand resting lightly on hers. There's no answer to grief. No charm. No right. You just sit with her until her shoulders stop shaking. When she leaves, you place a stone beside the gate. Not for mourning. For memory. So no one forgets he was here. In time, more girls arrive. Tepi teaches them now. You mostly observe, smile, correct the occasional brushstroke. One day she turns to you and says, "They call me Madra now." Mother. You nod. Good. Because this was never about your name being remembered. It was about hers. The circle continues. And you begin preparing. Not because death hovers, though she does, but because it feels right. You unroll old scrolls, clean the ink pots, rearrange the modest offering bowls near your doorway. You press oils into your skin, not to hide age, but to honor the body that carried you this far. You choose a linen shroud, not white, but ochre-dyed. The color of earth, of roots, of endings that feel like beginnings. One night, you dream you are walking through the field of reeds. That mythical paradise they always talked about, the one filled with green fields, clear streams, and gentle breezes that never die. You see your mother there, younger than you remember. She nods, and you understand. It's not a summons. Not yet. Just a reminder. That when the time comes, you will not go alone. That the woman who stitched mats and taught words and lit fires in young bellies, she will be welcomed. You wake with a strange peace in your chest. The girls are preparing something now. You're not sure what, but you catch snippets: cloth being dyed, jars being polished, a hymn practiced badly under someone's breath. You don't ask. You just smile. One morning, the scribe returns. He's older now. He hands you a scroll, stamped with a seal you don't recognize. It's from the Queen, he says. You arch an eyebrow. Someone told her about the woman who teaches girls to write. You don't open the scroll. Not yet. Instead, you place it on your table, beside the inkstone and the statue of Seshet. A nod from the world. Nothing more. You're not hungry for recognition. You're full. And as the sky shifts from gold to lilac, you begin one final verse. Just a simple line. Something Tepi can read aloud when you're gone. Something the wind can carry across the reeds, down the river, out to the sea. It reads, I was here. I mattered. I taught others to matter too. You lay the reed brush down, exhale slowly, and smile into the silence. And now, as your story fades into quiet starlight, let's take one last moment to breathe together. Inhale gently. Feel the way your chest rises, like the Nile just before flood season. Exhale, soft and slow, letting the weight of history fall away from your shoulders. You've just walked through a lifetime, one filled with sand and sorrow, struggle and small rebellions. You've lived inside the bones of a woman who, in spite of everything, found a way to leave a mark not in monuments, but in minds. There's something deeply calming about that, isn't there? No grand tomb. No gold. Just a name whispered into the dusk by those she taught to dream. And you were there for all of it. You felt the sting of the desert wind, heard the giggle of temple girls practicing forbidden letters, touched the cool stone walls of a house barely held together by willpower and clay. You bore witness. So now, let that knowledge settle gently in your chest. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts drift, like papyrus boats down a silver Nile. You are safe. You are still. And you are not alone. Good night, traveler. Sleep deeply, and may your dreams be long, green, and full of soft wind in the reeds.